After retrieving the two personnel that were in the pod, we had to clean them off in order to separate them. The stasis pods do tend to leave a little bit of a strange residue. Most of it's just leftover ether, which comes off pretty easy. But as we did that, I got a quick look at the one that wasn't quite human. And the female was really weird. We know this species. And they're also called the Akunachin. I keep mispronouncing it, but that's as close as I get working it slow. The female is, well, rather bluish, almost like pale blue. So I'm looking at, for a moment, I thought she was kind of low on oxygen, and then I realized she wasn't purple, but no, just this really pale blue. Her hair was also blue, which was surprising. I know this species, and this is odd. Usually they have like a silver whitish hair on top of their head. It doesn't make sense. What the heck? I mean, as we hosed them off, I realized that her slick body, just like the rest of her species, was still intact. There was no outside injuries. Yet she was so thin that we worried that we might hurt her just moving her from the gurney to the shower and back again. As me and Luke were able to deal with the male over in the next room, we realized he was in really good shape. This was to be expected since he did have modifications just like all the rest of us, but something was off. These modifications were of the really old style. This was odd. Why would somebody give a shit about those? I mean, who would go through that? Those old ones hurt like hell. I mean, the new ones, whatever. It's a couple shots and you're usually unconscious. But these ones? Nah, he had to go through the whole thing. We began checking his blood through a DNA registry once we realized he had all his parts, and we found nothing. We expanded the search even deeper as much as we could and found nothing. We couldn't figure out who this guy was. There was no identification. The guy came out, well, wearing nothing. So we had to check and see if there was anything else. And there was a couple additional items actually in the pod. Luke finds these handheld weapons and he holds them up, and his response was, "Seriously? These things? These are antiques." He wasn't kidding in the least little bit, as I realized they were both a type of energy bolt caster, but seriously, these things are old. It's like comparing the strange old matchlocks they used to use when firearms first started to a railgun back in the late 20th century. It's crazy. Why would they have things like this? I mean, seriously, looking at this in the blood registry, I'm starting to wonder how long have those two been out here? Luke and I were discussing things at length, at least as much as we could. We tried to match the weapon up, we tried to check the serial number, turns out there wasn't one, so this was a personally used weapon. So what the heck was he doing out here, and how come we can't find anything? As we discussed things, we realized that he was starting to wake up, and when he did, it wasn't pretty. He started thrashing wildly as though PTSD had got a hold of him. He started reaching out and swinging as hard as he could, screaming at the top of his lungs. And we tried our best to hold him down, telling him to calm down as much as we could. And then we started yelling at him, "Look, hey, you're aboard the SS Warsaw Rising. Calm down. You're not on an enemy craft. Calm down." The man recognized our words and shocked and asked, "What?" The way he answered showed he wasn't completely thawed out, even though you're not actually frozen in stasis, but it showed that he wasn't quite there yet. I had to speak slowly. "This is the Deep Space Search and Recovery Vessel, SS Warsaw Rising." He began to speak to us again, but I was having trouble figuring out this strange accent. What we could figure out is he said his name was Klaus. And that's what. So, Klaus, are you okay? What's with your companion? As soon as we mentioned that, he started screaming things like, "Where is she? Where is she? Where'd you put her? Where'd you take her?" And started screaming obscenities and started screaming, "Where is Grace? Where's Grace? Where's your?" And we tried to calm him down. Luke screamed, "Oh, you mean the blue?" With that, Klaus screamed, "What?" Clearly pissed off. Luke said, "She's fine. She's being examined by the rest of the crew." Klaus then began to fight us and trying to get out of bed. We couldn't allow this. You see, moving after a long stasis or having a quick thaw is very, very bad. It's a very, very bad idea. You need to give your body a few hours to restart or risk massive internal injuries if you're not careful. This is why I worried about the quick thaw with the crew earlier, but they were able to handle it, even though I could tell Luke wasn't feeling 100% at all himself. Even so, with the amount of thrashing around Klaus was doing, he's going to tear something. He's going to rip open his liver, rupture his kidneys, dislodge his spleen, something bad. Something really bad. So we kept trying to calm him down, but Klaus didn't seem to care. No matter how many times we told him, if you don't calm down, you're going to hurt yourself. Eventually, he just started swinging hard and punched Luke right in the face. Luke staggered backwards, and I immediately got back and slammed this Klaus guy right in the jaw. Down he goes, and as soon as his head fell down, he was out. Not knowing how long he was going to be out, I immediately reached over, grabbed a sedative, and jabbed it into his thigh. Thankfully, he'll be out for about an hour, given his size and the amount of sedative I gave him. I checked on Luke, and he was okay. A little worse for wear, you could say, but he would recover just fine. He had his modifications, and he'd heal up okay. As Klaus slept, I decided to go check on the ladies. The Blue herself was barely reaching consciousness as I walked in. I could see the look on the girls' faces as they watched her come into her own. You see, coming out of stasis is harsh on the body, but bringing a unborn child out of stasis is touchy at best, even with our technology now, and it takes much, much longer. If we had known that she was actually knocked up, we wouldn't even have brought her out of stasis anywhere near this fast. We would have done it really slow, but now we have to worry about what is now. The girls were moving around, constantly checking everything, doing their best to attend to both the girl and what was inside her. And that's when I asked if there was anything I could do to help. I knew too many fingers in the pie, so to speak, would just get in everybody's way, so I stayed stepped back. Yet suddenly they turned, looked at each other, and then turned and asked, "What's your blood type again?" I, of course, told them, and I've realized really quick that I was the only one on this entire ship that would be absolutely perfect for a blood rotation. This is not exactly a transfusion. This is actually something more interesting. You see, the way it works is that the stasis kind of lowers the blood temperature and also takes a lot of nutrients out of the system, which is why it takes a long time for the body to recover. By moving the cold blood into me and then putting the warm blood from me into her, it would not shock her system like it would if we just simply stuck her in someplace warm. And this would also definitely bring a lot of nutrients into her blood, as it's well known that our blood is much richer in nutrients than anything the Blues have. And to save the woman and the child, I didn't hesitate for a moment. I simply stepped forward and stuck my arms out and said, "Do it." They immediately ran over with the syringes, tubes, and everything else they had. This can easily keep the female and her child safe once everything starts going, but there will be risks, but not to them. You see, cryo blood leaving the body doesn't mean jack, and of course my blood going in is going to help them out. The issue is the blood coming out and going into me. Anybody receiving blood from anybody coming out of cryo like this is not going to have many nutrients, and it's pretty likely that the body could go into shock. You have to be very careful, but I'm protecting 2 lives here, not just my own. The girls asked for me to sit down, but I decided to stay standing the entire time. I sat there and watched my blood go back and forth into this Blue and then back to me. Or maybe it was her blood going into me. I don't know, and I didn't really care. All I knew is that I stood there trying desperately not to screech from the pain. This was like having your blood cells, along with your veins, arteries, muscles, and bones, implode and explode at the same time while they freeze and burn to a crisp at the same time. The pain began radiating up my arm from where the syringe was going in, down through my hand to the point where I could not move my hand anymore. The pain radiated up into the shoulder, which I could handle, but as it started going into my torso and up my neck, I put my head back and I tried not to show. But that was the point where Linda walked up with a small handkerchief and wiped the tears that were coming out of my eyes. That is how painful it is. I stood over them for at least an hour as I was afraid to sit down as the girls went around doing everything they could. I don't think either of them stayed still for more than about 4 seconds while they continued to watch over, taking all sorts of vital signs, bringing all sorts of equipment over, sometimes cracking it right into my leg, which didn't help the pain at all, but it did distract me just a little bit, which I appreciated. After about that hour, Klaus was brought in via a repulsor lift chair, as he was more or less rolled in through the door. When he got next to me, he realized what I was doing, as this has been a common practice ever since stasis ever started. He went over and I moved myself to the side just a little bit more so he could get close to this blue. He called her Grace. My Grace. I didn't know if that was a name or it's like that silly movie where they were stroking a round piece of gold, calling it precious. I don't know. I don't know, and I didn't really care at that point. All I knew is that the blue began to open her eyes. As she did, they began to disconnect me from her as she came to full fruition. Once she realized what was going on, she proceeded to freak the hell out with all the humans around. She began screaming about, "Don't hurt me! My baby! I'm with child! Where's my mate?" And all sorts of almost uncontrollable rants, single lines, but they were not connected at all in any type of one thought. As she was freaking out, both Jane and Linda tried to hold her down to keep her from thrashing about, as they weren't sure if she'd completely thawed out. They began to tell her, "Relax. While we release the machines and restraints that hold you, please hold still before you hurt yourself." This got the Blue's attention as she realized that both Linda and Jane were speaking in her language. This Blue's eyes got really, really wide and seemed to be focusing on us. Klaus was trying to say something, but he was also put back at what we were speaking. We were speaking fluent Akhenaten, and he was just amazed by this. Grace was finally released from all the straps, and she was slowly sat up as the girls helped her. She saw Klaus, and to hell with waiting, she went and jumped on him. And, of course, I wanted to reach over and grab that sheet and wrap over her to keep her from being exposed, but it seemed like she didn't really give a shit. I would have been happier to see all this display of affection, but I was on my way to the floor. The stasis blood was making me very, very dizzy, and it was like I was drunk, hungover, and got a concussion at the same time. Not fun. As the crew checked on me, Klaus said, "What's his problem?" as he looked at me. The ancient accent that he was using was very difficult to follow. The crew told him about the blood transfer and how it's dangerous for me. Of course, he understood. But Grace should be feeling like a million billion credits right about now. The blue in the lady's face had actually come back from a almost white blue to just a little bit darker, which is something we realized that she had finally finished thawing herself out. Her blue hair still surprised me, and I focused on it, as all the others have silver in their hair. It's strange. It was just blowing me for a loop. I didn't understand it, but I needed to focus on something before I ended up face-planting on the floor. As the crew made sure that I was all right, I looked over and asked, "Before I pass out, what is the last Earth year you remember?" When I said that, the crew just stopped and looked at me really strange for a moment. Then Klaus simply relaxed his face and said, "Earth year 2142, why?" Grabbing the adrenaline that's right next to me, I immediately pulled off the top and stuck it in my thigh and hit the plunger. It's not enough to send you into absolute fits of rage and have you bouncing on the walls, but it definitely will keep you awake. It's a good thing you're still sitting down, I said. We need to tell you both something. Hello everybody, this is Syntax. Thank you so much for joining me on today's chapter. This actually is the extension of a story I did. Actually, it was the second story that I ever did on this channel. If you wish to listen to the first part, feel free to look in the link in the description. Now before I go, I need to send out some thank yous to my supporters, and those would be Erica Gem, The Black Trapper, MTF Guard, SS Demon, Guardian Sage, Kaz Lin, Sir, and Chris Dixon. Thank you all so much for supporting the channel. Everybody else, I will see you on the next one. This is Syntext, ejecting.